forward to this one.
Yeah. So this is obviously Bitcoin Magazine Twitter Spaces. We do these multiple times a week, but today we're going to be talking about the Lightning Network and Federated Chamian Mints and what they mean, what they are, why they're interesting. This is a recorded conversation, and it will be released on the Bitcoin Spaces live feed, which you can find on your podcast, whatever podcast app you use. It's also published on YouTube. And yeah, that's basically why we're here and what we're about. So, Eric, you've been working on Chaumian Mints. So can you give us a little bit of your backstory, who you are, and why you are interested in Chaumian Mints?
Okay, awesome. Yeah, my background is mostly in computer science, and as such, I had a keen interest in old eCash schemes. At university, I did a talk about all the development from the beginning in the 80s with Chaum's eCash schemes and right up to Bitcoin and all the amazing stuff like Lightning. And so that's how I got the idea of being able to integrate all these different ideas. Yeah, and so at some point I heard about Liquid and federations. And I was like, why don't we use the federation tech to implement these old eCash ideas that allow us to have perfect privacy on Bitcoin, or perfect privacy in an eCash scheme to improve Bitcoin. And that's where the idea came from.
Very cool. Very cool. Casey, you want to go next?
Yeah, sounds good. So I am a programmer, live in the Bay Area. I used to be briefly a Bitcoin core developer at Chaincode Labs a long time ago. And like Eric, I'm really interested in pre-Bitcoin forgotten knowledge. A lot of Bitcoiners don't really know about stuff like eCash and other weird systems that existed before Bitcoin. Often they were pretty centralized, but they have interesting properties. And my interest in Chaumian Mints actually comes being concerned about Lightning Network usability for normies. I think it's likely that stuff like payment failures, difficulty in managing nodes, etc. I think there's going to be real usability challenges there, especially for just normal people. And so I'm very interested in Federated Chamian Mints because they allow this very nice trade-off where you can have essentially what amounts to a hosted wallet, but with some good, better security guarantees than if a single actor was hosting that wallet. Yep, so that's where I'm coming from.
Love it. Love it. Rindell, do you want to, I'm assuming you want to stay completely anonymous, keep us all in the dark about who you are and what you're about?
I'm a software engineer, at least that's what they say. I've worked a lot on, I'll call it cryptography engineering, so taking cryptographic primitives and building really big systems out of them. A lot of distributed systems work on really big systems. And I've been talking to people around here and in PlebNet and other venues for a little while now about scaling the Lightning Network in kind of two different ways. One of them is the last mile scaling, which Casey talked about a little bit, like how do we have end users get a private and inexpensive and really high throughput experience without having everybody in the world have multiple Lightning channels open. I just don't think that's going to work. And there's a lot of different interesting ideas there. And then another dimension is how do we scale Lightning routing? So we've been having a lot of conversations around what would subnetting for Lightning actually look like. And when the Federated Chamian Mints funding was announced by Blockstream, it just fell into place for me in my head. This is a really interesting new primitive in the toolbox. It comes with some interesting trade-offs, but I think that for the leaf nodes of the Lightning graph, it's really appealing for a bunch of reasons, and there's a lot of interesting directions that it can go in. So I'm just super excited to be digging into this as like a new primitive that we can use to build really interesting stuff on top of Lightning.
Love it. And finally, Vivek, I'm so glad you decided to join us on stage. I know you've been super busy lately. Can you give everyone a brief introduction to who you are, and don't undersell yourself or I'll scream.
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Vivek. I do business development for Blockstream, but worn many hats, done some M&A stuff as an analyst back in the day, done lots of consultative sales work. Right now, these days, I'm working with Christian Decker to essentially figure out the product market fit for our Greenlight Lightning node hosted solution, and also working with Samson and the team on Liquid. I'm happy to be here and just participate and see what cool new federated models we can explore and security guarantees, as Casey elaborated on.
Love it. So I think the most useful way to go about this is I'd like us to talk about, as a group, so this is a free-for-all, please, if anyone on stage has something to say or a comment or a thought or a question, just, jump in and say it. The first thing I want to do is talk about the specific challenges. I want people to understand exactly what a Chaumian Mint is and what it means to have a federated Chaumian Mint system as well. So I suspect that the best way to do that is to start by defining the challenges that these systems attempt to solve. So what are the problems that exist or that may exist in the future that we can highlight and then talk about how the system aims to resolve those?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Okay, then I think the biggest problems Bitcoin is facing or will be facing privacy, which is already a concern, and scalability, which kind of is a concern today, but not as much as I expected to be in the future. In the future, I'm thinking of that on-chain usage will essentially be a privilege of very few, unless there's some throughput increase on-chain, which always has been contentious, because often comes, if we want to have major throughput increase, it comes with higher requirements for full nodes, and that's just that people haven't been comfortable with doing. So I think we are facing a future where for most people doing on-chain transactions isn't all that feasible. Talking about the majority of people that make less than, let's say, $50 a day, which I think is quite a few people on this planet, and we still want them to be able to participate in Bitcoin. So I think federated eCash can solve this problem in a sense, right? Having a different trade-off when it comes to trust properties. And that's one of the ways to put it.
Got it. Okay. Privacy and usability. Was that right? Or scalability? Was it scalability or usability?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Got it.
Scalability and usability too, kind of, but that's more that comes automatically, more centralized solutions.
Got it. Okay. We're into
I was going to say, a lot of times when we talk about scaling Bitcoin, what it really comes down to is how many, transactions can you have before you actually have to touch the blockchain, right? So with Lightning, the idea is you do an on-chain transaction to open a channel. I open a channel to Odell. I do as many transactions back and forth on that channel as possible. And then eventually at some point in the future, we do another on-chain transaction to close it. With these two on-chain transactions, we have all of these different payments that can go back and forth. And ideally, you leave your channels open indefinitely, and you're really only using the layer one blockchain as a decentralized cryptographic backed justice system, right? In a perfect world, I have all these channels open. I never actually have to go down to the main chain, but if there's, a conflict or a dispute, then we go and we settle up on the blockchain. And that's great if you have channels open, but if you look at kind of the size of a Bitcoin Lightning channel open in terms of block weight, and you do the math of a Bitcoin block can have, let's say, 1.3 megs of transactions in it. Channel open is on the order of 140 VBytes. You multiply that out, multiply by how many blocks you have in a day, assuming 10-minute blocks. And the conclusion that you come to is if you wanted to have 1 billion people in the world all have one channel open, it's going to take 3 years. Right? If nobody's doing any other transactions, nobody's closing channels, nobody has 2 channels, everybody's just opening one channel. And so the conclusion that you come to, if you do that, is you say, all right, we need to have either more interesting batching mechanisms to bulk open channels, or you just come to the conclusion that not everybody in the world is going to have a Lightning node with a channel open. So one model that you could have is you can have custodial wallet, right? Where you have something like Wallet of Satoshi, where you have an account and they have a very well-connected, well-capitalized node that does all the actual Lightning transactions, and you just have an account balance with them. That's similar to if you're using like Cash App or something, right? Like you can think of Cash App as a Bitcoin scaling layer. It's just very centralized and very closed. And what's cool about Chaumian Mints, and we should probably take a step back in a minute and talk about what a federated Chaumian Mint is. But what's cool about it is it lets you have a less centralized, federated custodial solution for a Lightning wallet. So instead of me trusting one company or one party with my Lightning wallet balance and them doing all the Lightning transactions, I can put trust in a federation of different entities that maybe are in different like geopolitical regimes, have them manage Lightning transactions out to the rest of the network. And then within the mint, all of my transactions, other people who have accounts there, never actually touch Lightning or touch anything else. We're just sending bytes of data back and forth. So it's a way of, if you think in the future that this is going to take off, what you can imagine is there's going to be a network connected by Lightning of these different Chaumian mints. You join up to the one that has the custodians that you trust, or that has the properties or capabilities or semantics that you want. You have an account there. All of the transactions inside of that bank, if you will, are like fast, as private as they possibly could be, and very secure. And then when you need to move money between these mints, it's over Lightning. So that's the big picture. If this really takes off, you get like crazy good scalability, you get crazy good privacy, and you can still connect to Lightning without every person in the world needing a Lightning channel.
Got it. Got it. Matt, you've been uncharacteristically quiet. Would you add anything to that or to the discussion so far?
Basically, my TLDR would be creating more accessible Bitcoin privacy in a way that has better trust properties than current custodial wallets, which everyone's already using. Like so many people are using custodial Lightning wallets.
Yeah, for sure. Or custodial on-chain wallets, which is even worse.
I'd also like to add, like Rendell made some great points about the scalability, about the Lightning Network and channel opens. Everything in Bitcoin is going towards this like scalable mentality. We've gained some fantastic V-byte efficiency through Taproot and Schnorr signatures. So a lot of this is a similar mindset of not necessarily needing to reveal like the inner details, for example, like the script, like the policy itself, other things like that. So it's usable and a bit more efficient. So it's great.
Yeah, Pete, it might make sense just to take a step back and describe what, a Fedimint is, and then it might make more sense for people about where this fits, and maybe we can talk about like different applications and problems that it solves.
I love it. Let's do it. Do you maybe, Rendell, do you want to give a high level your view, and then we can jump to Eric and Casey as it makes sense to do so?
One suggestion, maybe we should start with a non-federated Chaumian Mint first, and then layer on Federation on top, because they're a bit separate and probably confusing to try to digest them both at the same time.
I love it.
David Chaum. I don't know who that is.
David Chaum is an old school cryptographer. He's still around. He developed a system called eCash, and I don't have the Wikipedia article in front of me, so details are probably wrong. But eCash was essentially a centralized payment system. I don't remember if people got cards or how it worked, but the idea was that you could pay at merchants for stuff in your daily life with fiat, but it used cryptography, in particular blind signatures, so that every time a user was spending money, the operator of eCash or DigiCash didn't learn anything about who it was that was like making the purchase.
Eric, what is a blind signature? I have heard of Schnorr signatures and ECDSA. What is a blind signature, and is it overlap with those?
Yeah, basically a blind signature scheme is a signature scheme that allows the user to acquire a signature on a message without the signer ever learning this message. And normally this wouldn't sound too useful, because normally if you sign a message or a contract, in case of eCash, what you actually use it for is that each signature has the same value. Let's say each signature is worth $1. Generate a bunch of random messages And the only property that these messages need to have is they need to be unique. And you can essentially do this by drawing them randomly and having a big enough like a message space to draw from. And then you let the Chaumian Mint blind sign these random messages, give you back the blind signatures. You can unblind these signatures, and now you have like a bunch of just random messages with signatures attached. And each such pair, we can call them eCash tokens, for example, or I think we call them redeem receipts in our blog post. Each one is worth $1. So if I give the Chaumian Mint $5 and 5 of such blinded messages, just random messages essentially, then I get 5 such tokens. And I can then spend them anonymously because the bank or the Federated Chamian Mint never learn.
If I can jump in really quick, when you're thinking about like cryptographic protocols, I think it's really helpful to think about an analogy just like using paper and just like physically passing things around. A good metaphor for blind signatures, and I didn't make this up, I'm stealing this from the Chom paper, is if anybody remembers like carbon paper, right? So like you had 2 pieces of paper and you'd sign the top one and then you'd lift it up and underneath your signature is like transferred through because there's a layer of like graphite on the bottom of the first paper. So use that when like the utility guy comes to your house and like hooks up your gas and you sign a piece of paper and they like give you the bottom paper. That's like carbon paper. So imagine what Eric is talking about. Imagine that you have these carbon envelopes and there's like a slip inside of it. And so you have a serial number on a slip of paper and you seal that inside of an envelope and you hand it to the Chaumian Mint. And the Chaumian Mint doesn't know what the serial number is because it's inside this envelope, and they sign the envelope and then they hand it back to you. And you can tear the envelope open and pull out the piece of paper. And now,
Oh, I think we lost him.
I can continue that thought.
Yeah,
so
go for it.
The banks, you hand the bank this envelope, and inside of it is this little slip with the serial number, and the bank signs the outside of the envelope essentially, and the bank's signature is transferred to the slip on the inside of the envelope with the serial number, but the bank can't see what that serial number is. So then let's say this represents like a deposit of $1. So then you leave and you come back later to the bank when you want to spend that dollar and you present it with that signed serial number. But because the bank never saw what that serial number was, it just saw the outside of the envelope that it signed, it can't link that serial number back to the original act of signing. It can't correlate the person who's showing up with some person that it's seen in the past. But it can verify that it produced its signature. It can see it produced the serial number was signed by its private key. And so it can just trust it and be like, okay, I guess this is worth $1, and let it do whatever you want to do, i.e. make a purchase or make an outgoing Lightning transfer in the case of a Lightning Chaumian Mint. And that's the basic. You show up and you say you deposit money and it produces one of these blind signatures. You get the serial number. And then you show up later and say, hey, I want to do something with some money. And the bank isn't able to correlate those two events because it never saw the serial number that you're presenting later when it originally signed it.
Got it. I haven't heard that before. That's a fantastic metaphor, analogy, whatever the right term is.
Yeah, I love the idea of somebody showing up to what amounts to a bank and being like, hey, you don't know who I am, but check out this signature. Like, you made it, so you can trust it. So do what I tell you to do with the amount of money that the signature covers. It's just great. Like, customers show up, the bank has no idea who they are, but it's like, I guess I approved their deposit before, so this must be legit. And then they just do what the customer tells them to do.
So, Casey, how did the eCash project end? Does that have anything to do with how the federated model is multiple banks and a bit more better off?
So I think that I'm not super familiar with the history, but I think the original eCash implementation, which was called DigiCash, I think it just wasn't popular. It allowed individuals to make private payments. And I don't think that this was something that people really cared about. I don't think it was super popular. I think it did a trial with one bank somewhere in America. And I should really get the Wikipedia article in front of me so that I know what's going on. But I think it just wasn't It just wasn't popular, and it just faded into obscurity.
Okay, so
Rendell's back.
Yeah, like from what I gathered, like I wanted to get to reason too because I'm writing a paper about this, and it seems like it's really benign. It's just like they ran out of money. They had some tests running, I think with Deutsche Bank actually, and they were experimenting with the Chaumian eCash idea. But as you said, the interest wasn't there. And then also after 9/11, there were some new regulations about AML and KYC laws, and this all happened in parallel. The DigiCash just went bankrupt, while at the same time new legislation came into effect and made it completely impossible to ever run such a like Chaumian bank on a legal basis.
The key change here is for the first time we have programmable money that is sound, that increases in purchasing power, that you can easily interact with. And one of the coolest parts about Eric's proposal is that it interacts directly with the Lightning Network. So it takes it a step further. Like not only are you have this federated model so that the trust in the custodians, any individual custodian is reduced, and you have privacy from the custodians so that the custodians can't see all of your transactions and your balances. But you can also directly interact with any other wallet on the Lightning Network seamlessly without any kind of regulatory approval with banks or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's really important because DigiCash was regulated. It was like a regulated legal entity. And so it could only do regulated legal entity type stuff, which made it less appealing and less powerful.
Yeah, and I think like the portability that you get over the Lightning Network is also really cool, right? If I am in a federated mint that Odell and P and Eric are running, and then I decide that I want to move to a different mint, or I can move everything over Lightning, or I can be in multiple and interact with other services. And one of the things that I'm like really looking forward into the future about is having different mints have different policies around what capabilities they support, and you being able to just like pick and choose where you want to be spending your money on different things, and having that all interoperable over the Lightning Network is really amazing, right? Having one Chaumian Mint is cool. Having an internet of Chaumian Mints all connected by the Lightning Network is way cooler.
Yo, what is going on, plebs? We're going to take a break from our programming to tell you about the resurrection of our print magazine, starting with the El Salvador issue. Starting this fall, Bitcoin Magazine will be available on newsstands nationwide and at retail stores such as Barnes and Noble. Don't want to get off your couch, though? No problem. You can also go to store.bitcoinmagazine.com. So skip the line and get each issue shipped directly to your front door with our annual subscription. I'm talking 4 issues a year that contain exclusive interviews and profiles with leading Bitcoiners, actionable insights on the state of the market, breaking news and cultural trends, along with powerful photos and artwork from the best artists in the world. Subscribe today and get 21% off using code podcast at checkout. That's PODCAST podcast at checkout.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So the description we gave earlier of the envelopes and the carbon copy, that was a description of blind signatures, or that was a description of how Chaumian mints work?
That was a description of, so the envelope was blind signatures.
Okay, great.
Using that for money is Chaumian mints.
Okay, got it. That was where I was missing the connection. So can we just give like a high level summary of what a Chaumian mint is one more time for the audience? And then should we then transition into federated Chaumian mints?
That sounds great. I would say that a Chaumian mint is essentially a bank that uses blind signatures to unlink deposits and spends.
Okay. So if a Chaumian mint is a bank that uses blind signatures to unlink deposits and spends, as we've described. Actually, one more question before we go into that. Why would a bank in the current system want to do that? I'm so curious why. I think you said Deutsche Bank was experimenting with this. Why would they want to do that? Because that seems like it would be like against their interest. It makes sense.
I think banks want to do a lot of things, and they want to have the best product possible for their customers, and they want to reduce their liability by knowing customers' balances and transactions and everything. But they're hamstrung by regulation, and they keep getting more and more hamstrung. PayPal is not really a bank, but they're like a neobank. PayPal doesn't want to block people's accounts. They don't want to lock people's accounts and stop people from using the product. They want as many people to use the product as possible, but they're forced and compelled to do under burdensome regulation.
Yeah, totally. I think a great analogy here is like data storage, right? Like it's expected at this point that if you're using Dropbox, which you shouldn't be using, or iCloud, which you shouldn't be using, or whatever you're using, that they basically don't have access to your information. That's a selling point for a lot of these services. It's, oh yeah, no one in our company, it's fully encrypted, client side, no one in our company could even look at your data if they wanted to. And we're already seeing, like with iCloud, the announcement that they're supposedly scanning all of your iCloud photos now to keep everyone safe from child pornography. And the idea that we would hold data providers accountable for that information, I think would be surprising to most. But for some reason with banks, we just accept that, oh yeah, they have to have 100% insight into everything. And the idea that they can keep that totally private is something that everybody has just already, I don't want to say given up on, but acquiesced to.
It's also the Chaumian Mint model also just, it maps the analog system onto a digital system really cleanly, right? What you end up with these vouchers or these, tokens, they look like paper money, right? Like each one is a uniformly denominated bearer instrument that you can pass around between users and then deposit it at the bank. Right. If you're trying to build an electronic cash system, it's a pretty natural way to model the problem. One of the reasons why, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the federated model in a minute, but one of the downsides with it is that it only works at your bank. And so there's a huge kind of centralization risk. Like the bank is a single point of failure, which I think is a big reason why Eric's work is so interesting.
Sorry, that is an issue with non-federated.
Yeah, with non-federated, with the old school one. If I'm trusting Deutsche Bank, then I'm trusting Deutsche Bank.
Yep. Yeah, it's almost like wildcat banks from back in the day, where every bank had their own currency and they were interoperable only if the bank said that they were interoperable.
Like the original Chaumian Mints proposal was a trade-off. You had what was essentially perfect privacy, but it came at custodial risk.
Yeah.
And you didn't have the ability to seamlessly interact. This proposal mitigates the two main negatives, which is the custodial risk and the ability to actually transact outside of the mint.
Said
easily.
Yeah, I think this interaction with other banks wasn't even that much of a problem. But the problem would have been, let's say, the US imposes some rules that US banks may only cooperate with other banks that know their customers. Then if you run a bank with Chaumian eCash, then you cannot interact with any of these banks. And that's how financial regulations are done these days. Many of them aren't even laws in all the countries where they apply, but it's just the most important banks of this world forcing this onto other banks in order for them to be able to actually send money between each other. So that's the power of Bitcoin, that you don't have to ask for permission that way. You just connect to a Lightning network, and now everyone who runs a Lightning node or who is part of such a federated Chaumian bank can just interact with each other. No permissions needed.
Love it. Okay, so let's transition to, so we've defined what a Chaumian mint is. Let's define what a federated Chaumian mint is.
Yeah, on the highest level of understanding, when we federate some entity, then we just split it up into n parts, of which up to a certain number that's called f may be malicious without the functionality of the entire system breaking down. For example, we have this with federated sidechains like Liquid. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to repeat that. You said,
Eric, would you say that a good, I don't know if it's an analogy, but for Bitcoiners is instead of just a single sig custodian, you have basically a multi-sig custodian. You're spreading out the risk.
Imagine you have a 2 of 3 multi-sig wallet. Then you have 2 risks. You have one risk of just losing your keys, and you mitigate this by having not a 3 of 3, but a 2 of 3. So you may lose one key, and you're still able to get your Bitcoins out. And then you have the second risk, which is theft. And you mitigate it by needing 2 of these 3 signatures. And so that only if someone manages to steal 2 of your 3 keys, then they can actually take your funds. And actually, that's how the on-chain part of a federated Chaumian bank is implemented. It's just a multi-sig wallet. Yeah, that's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's the first asset that can actually be held in such a way that only if a certain amount of a certain set of people agrees, then you can transfer funds. That was never possible before. There was always some higher instance, like a bank that could just dictate who owns funds and who doesn't.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk about how one implements, or what how does one get from a Chaumian mint to a federated Chaumian mint in terms of practically? What does that mean? What is the proposal? What does it mean for, how does the Lightning Network integrate with that?
I think it's good to separate out the Lightning Network from, it's irrelevant what the federated Chaumian mint does. It just so happens that it's like a particularly appealing application of federated Chaumian mints to have them make and receive Lightning Network payments. But in principle, you could have a federated Chaumian mint that did anything. You could have a federated Chaumian mint that had a stash of Beanie Babies, and then when you could send it Beanie Babies and then tell it to send out Beanie Babies and have Beanie Baby tokens. So it's like a very general technology. But in the Lightning Network case, the federated Chaumian mint would be making and receiving payments. But the actual federation itself is something I don't know very much about, so I'll let somebody else take those details.
So just to be clear, and I love the analogy of Beanie Babies. We should do that just because it would be hilarious. Federated Chamian Mints that the only thing you can exchange is Beanie Babies. But so you could do this on chain. It does not necessarily have to be on Lightning. The fact that it is on Lightning is because Lightning is an extremely effective way of transmitting money.
Or
value.
The way that I would frame it, right, is imagine you have a Bitcoin federated Chaumian mint, right? So there's Chaumian mint where I show up to it and I hand it some Bitcoin and it hands me a bunch of these vouchers or tokens that represent well-defined denominations of Bitcoin. And I can hand them to you, P, you can hand them to Odell, and then Odell can redeem them at the mint and get Bitcoin back out. That's a thing that you could just go build. And you could do that as a single custodian Chaumian mint, or you could do it as a federation. And that way there's not a single player that can unilaterally run away with everybody's funds. If you were to build that, you can imagine that there are APIs or operations or commands that you can issue to the mint. So one command that you can issue to the mint is, here's some Bitcoin, give me vouchers. Another command that you can issue at the mint is this voucher valid? Another command that you can issue at the mint is redeem this voucher for Bitcoin, right? These are the commands that you can give to the mint, because the mint is just a piece of software and it'll do things using either vouchers or Bitcoin. Where this connects to the Lightning Network is, imagine if I can take one of my vouchers, my payment coupons to the mint and say, hey, use this to pay this Lightning invoice. And then it pays the Lightning invoice on my behalf, using that voucher. Or I say, hey, generate a Lightning invoice and then pay me in my Chaumian Mint tokens. And now other people, or myself using another wallet, can send payment over the Lightning Network to the mint, and I redeem that payment for my Chaumian Mint token. So it's less that the mint is built out of Lightning, and it's more that if you have a Chaumian Mint implementation that plugs into the Lightning Network, then it can interact with the Lightning Network like any other Lightning node. But on our side of the mint, we're passing around these little blobs of data that are redeemable for Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should separate the Lightning part from the federated Chaumian Mint part, because actually it's quite separate in the first instantiation. There might be some implementation down the road where we actually federate the Lightning node, but for now, all we do to interact with the Lightning Network is we just have some sort of smart contract in the federated Chaumian Mint that enables trustless Lightning payments, essentially, or Lightning payments in the same trust model as the federation already has, the federated trust model. And I think we wanted to come back to how would we actually federate a mint, and that comes down to 2 parts. One part is holding up the collateral, which is on-chain, and that's just a good old multi-sig wallet on Bitcoin. And the second part is the issuance of these eCash tokens. And in a traditional Chaumian mint, that would be done using some client signature scheme. And for federated Chaumian mints, we need a threshold blind signature scheme. Meaning, again, you can think about it like multi-signature for Bitcoin, but for blind signatures. But in the academic world, we call these multi-signatures actually threshold signatures, because you need a certain threshold of participants that cooperate with you to generate such a signature. But yeah, essentially, it's just a T of N blind signature scheme where like a certain amount of parties in the federation has to be honest, and then they can generate these vouchers or these blind signatures. Yeah, and that's the two parts you essentially need to federate Chaumian Bank or Chaumian Mint. Like the last thing maybe to mention is that you still need some consensus algorithm between them, between the federation members. So you actually agree on the right order of transactions, because that's the same problem that Bitcoin solved for an open set of validators being miners. But like for a closed set where we know who is a part of the federation or part of the network, this consensus was solved long ago, like in the 80s or 90s, if I remember correctly. And so we're just using some old tech there to get an order of transactions, which every like financial system needs. Otherwise, you can easily double spend.
Got it. Interesting.
So, Eric, like this sounds very academic. Is it possible to use mini mint today, and have you used it on anything?
Please don't use it right now. Like at least not on mainnet. Please use Rectest or something like that if you want to play.
This is how we know that. This is how we know you're not a shitcoiner. You're like,
yeah.
For the love of God, do not use this amazing.
I built it as a proof of concept.
Yeah, no, I just love it. You're like, for the love of God, do not use this amazing thing that I have built. It's not quite ready yet. You should be testing it and breaking it yourself, as opposed to being like just floating it out into the ether as a.
Just asking you, Eric, in general, I think I saw you bought a coffee with it or something. And then also I was wondering if people did want to get involved and contribute, what repo should they look at? Maybe what language should they be familiar with? Any general suggestions?
Yeah, what you saw, yes, that I bought a coffee with it at HCPP in Parallelpolis. But what I did there was I actually had a Rectest federation running with like completely worthless Bitcoin, but I coupled it to a Lightning node, which was actually running on mainnet. So I did atomic swap from my local Rectest network to mainnet Bitcoin, which is a totally insane thing to do unless it's on your own computer. But yeah, so if people want to contribute, and I had a few people reach out to me, and I don't want to disclose their identities yet because that would force them to commit. But in private, I've been talking to a few people. Like ideally, some Rust, like Minimint is written in Rust. But also, if you're just generally interested and want to improve documentation and all the good stuff, if you just want to play around with it, it's on GitHub. It's github.com/fedimint/minimint. Or you can also find the link to the GitHub repo at fedimint.org. And there you can just look around. I wrote a little README that instructs you to set a federation on Rectest. Like you need the installation of Bitcoin Core. And there are some scripts included in the repository that automatically spin up a Rectest network. And then also the Minimint nodes. And then you have a federation of, I think, by default, 4 nodes running, of which one might be malicious. And then you can just play around with it. It's really unfinished right now. Like there's only a CLI app to interact with it. Yeah, but I'd be super happy about more contributors, because that would mean that we can move along more quickly. And maybe like my dream is that at the next HCPP in Prague, I might be able to actually buy a coffee with a mainnet federation. That would be awesome. But for now, for the love of God, please don't use it on mainnet. Some flaws in the wallet logic that may make you lose funds, and I don't want it. I couldn't live with that.
Yeah,
please don't.
Yeah, just quick observation. So Redchest, for people who don't know, you can run a Bitcoin node in what's called Redchest mode, where it just sets up like a private little Bitcoin network and you can mine blocks at will. It's really great for testing. They're completely worthless because it's just like blocks that you mine at will on your own laptop. I think it's funny that because you atomic swapped that to the Lightning Network, Redchest running on your laptop is more valuable than half the shit coins that are on Coinbase right now. So good job for that. Other quick point, you mentioned Rust is an awesome language. If folks are looking at contributing to the Bitcoin ecosystem and are looking for a new language to learn, a lot of Bitcoin projects are popping up in Rust right now. Minimint, which we're talking about, if you follow like Sapio, that's all in Rust. There's some cool stuff happening with LDK and Rust Lightning. Learning Rust will let you contribute to a lot of projects that are like up and coming in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And then to Eric's point about, There you go. And then to Eric's point about there's like obvious things that are wrong, like he's done an amazing job working on it so far. There's some stuff that's just like low hanging fruit that if you're a Rust developer, you can jump in and work on. If you've done Tokyo networking before, just adding like retries, the networking code and that kind of thing, there's like lots of opportunity to get involved and help out with the project.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing, like the people from Summer of Bitcoin reached out to me. So if you are like a student at university and want to get into Bitcoin development, then I will be preparing some project proposals for Summer of Bitcoin, and then you could apply for the 2022 version of it. So that might be a really cool way to get into it, because then we'd have like some structured mentoring and stuff like that. If you're interested, just take a look at Summer of Bitcoin once it's out. Like I will have to write a proposal, multiple project proposals till December, and then I think they will publish it beginning of the year, and people can apply. So that would be awesome. But generally, if you just want to work on the project, contact me. I'm available on Telegram, on Twitter. Like, just reach out. Always happy.
Love it.
You can, instead of Summer of Code, it can be Summer of Chom.
No. Rindell, that was a terrible pun.
Yeah. But now that you have a picture in your head of Federated Chamian Mints, right? Like the model is you go to the mint and hand them Bitcoin and they give you these eCash tokens and you can hand those to anybody and they can go redeem them for Bitcoin. And then when you plug the Lightning Network into the other side of that, what you can see is, or what I hope you can see, right, is that that's a model where you could have a semi-custodial managed Lightning wallet, build that into Wallet of Satoshi, and now there's not a single custodian that you're trusting with your funds. It's actually a federation, and if you're spending money to other people who have that same wallet, then it doesn't even touch Lightning. So it's actually even faster and more private and cheaper, right? That's a pretty cool thing.
It's very cool. So when will the pressure, let's step into the pontificating zone. When
You mean the pressure to adopt things like Federated Chamian Mints?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think actually we're already facing that pressure. And that pressure is not coming from scaling problems, it's coming from usability problems. Super, super hard to run a Lightning Network node. I have a project that I work on that requires people who want to use our project to run their own Lightning Network node. And that's like the main barrier to onboarding users, basically. All sorts of non-trivial things. Got to manage your channels. You've got to manage liquidity. You've got to keep your computer online, etc. And all this is... Oh, no, go ahead.
I do want to push back slightly. I think you are both correct. And I think that certainly recently it's gotten a lot easier and there are much larger communities of people running their own Lightning nodes. But I do agree that it is a significant challenge for the average person to go from zero to running their own Lightning node, though both things like Umbrel and Raspberry Blitz, and then also I would just say like Voltage, which basically you can like host your own. They will host a Lightning node for you. But again, that is not to say that everything you just said is not 100% accurate, because I think it is. The average person is not going to be able to just download an application on their phone or on their computer and just be like, I'm running a Lightning node.
That's where the real advantage is. The real advantage is when we see a mobile wallet that is as easy to use as something like Wallet of Satoshi, but has way better trust properties in terms of custodial risk because it's federated, and it has insanely good privacy guarantees because of Chaumian Mints.
Exactly.
And it'll have better privacy guarantees than pretty much anything we have out there right now, with the trade-off being a slight custodial risk. And you can just install it on your phone. You don't have to run a node. You don't have to know what channels are, and you can interact with the greater Lightning Network.
100%. It's basically...
And to be clear, like even better privacy than like cryptocurrencies that their only feature is privacy. Like it's real good privacy.
Oh, interesting. Wait. Speak more to that for a second.
Yeah.
So there's just think about an outside observer looking at one of these federated Chaumian Lightning Mints. They see it sending and receiving payments, but there are many users, but that federated mint is acting on behalf of many users. And in the normal case, an outside observer can't tell which payment is being made on behalf of which user. So all the users of the federated mint act as an anonymity set. So this provides extremely good privacy, and it means there's absolutely no temporary or permanent footprint that these transactions leave.
So how does this Spicy question.
And then within the mint, like the Federation doesn't know what any of the payment activity was because they have no way of linking deposits and withdrawals. So
Yes,
the
of course.
operators of the mint can't tell what you're doing. And then from outside of the mint, all of the transactions are all flowing through this single aggregation point. Casey said it really well. It acts as a giant anonymity set, right? So like the more people use your mint, the more anonymous it is because all of the traffic gets merged together going, in and out of the gateway of the mint. And then inside of the mint, there's no linkage between transactions and withdrawals. There's not a ledger where you can follow all of the transactions.
So is this basically like in its ideal form, it's like a superior, how does this relate to CoinJoins? Let's talk about that. I know it doesn't directly relate at all, but like
it's like a massive ongoing coin join.
Exactly.
Like you transfer into the mint, which is like entering the coin join. And then if you want to get out, you transfer out. And I guess the anonymity set is all the users of the mint. And it's also not an on-chain coin join. It's like an off-chain coin join, which adds an additional more privacy.
So I expect all the CoinJoin implementations to hate this. I'm kidding.
You can think of it more as a tumbling protocol, actually. Like there are CoinJoin and tumbling in Bitcoin, and like something like Tumblebit comes pretty close actually to what you could achieve with Minimint.
Can you reiterate or define the difference between a tumbler and a CoinJoin?
Okay, a CoinJoin, you have a single transaction with inputs and outputs, and only all the inputs and outputs in this one transaction get mixed. That is your anonymity set. But with tumbling, you have anonymity set over a bigger amount of inputs and outputs. Like with Tumblebit, I think you can have a lot of transactions that set up inputs to a big tumbling pool, and then later on you can take your funds out again. So essentially with Minimint, you have the anonymity set of everyone who sent Bitcoins into the Federation ever when you take it out again, because you can't really tell who already took their Bitcoins out again and who didn't.
What is the trade-off?
It's really great.
What is the trade-off for on-chain transactions between a tumbler and a CoinJoin? Like why aren't tumblers supported by Samurai and all the other related?
I'm not entirely sure. It's not directly my field of research, but as I understood it so far, like tumbling protocols more complicated, and I'm not even sure if like Wabi Sabi couldn't be counted as a tumbling protocol because they use some blind signature scheme internally. So I'd actually have to look into this again.
Are there any non-custodial tumblers?
I don't think you can. Like you can do a series of coin joins, but like most tumblers are all custodial.
I think that's maybe the issue, is that we only know how to make custodial tumblers, which have that single party, single point of failure problem, and are also like super illegal, like the most illegal.
And when we say illegal, we mean just that the government doesn't like anybody to have money that they have full control over.
I think we've seen specific legal action again by the state against people running tumblers.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
It's okay. If you're a prosecutor and you can't convince a jury that a tumbler is money laundering, then you suck at your job, right? That's just how it is.
It's so crazy to me that the goal of having privacy around your money is something that is even in question as a legal issue. It is, obviously, and I understand why, but it's crazy that people are sucked into the often false narratives around that. So how long do we think before Yellen and all the other related people and agencies are promoting narratives that Federated Chamian Mints not only are trying to destroy Christmas, but also are supporting child eating and cannibalism and all sorts of other terrible things?
Honestly, just on that like very specific question, I think we might be good. They don't even really understand how Bitcoin works. Like they don't demonstrate understanding of very simplest concepts. So like having somebody go like up on, I don't know, in front of Congress or whatever and being like Federated Chamian Lightning Mints are a threat to, I don't know. I've been consistently surprised by how uncoordinated and uninformed state actors are. Like they haven't really done anything meaningful against Bitcoin except for some like a sort of unfavorable tax treatment by the IRS. And I'm very specifically against like on-chain transactions and Bitcoin developers and miners and stuff like that. So I don't know. It'd be surprising to me if they got their act together. Although I guess if one of them, if a federated Chaumian Lightning Mint was super popular, then yeah, maybe we would start getting some heat.
That's definitely the biggest risk with a proposal like this, federations in general, especially if they're offering privacy, it becomes a regulatory target. What's really promising to me about this proposal is that you can see it appears that Eric intends to do, and Blockstream with their funding to him intends to do it in an open source way, a free and open source way. The fact that we could have many such federations doing this, and they could be located around the world in different places, competing with each other and interacting with each other, makes it way more difficult for that kind of regulatory attack to happen. But I would caution against being too cocky in terms of if it's very public, if it's being done by very obvious regulatory targets that have they're all based in the same country, stuff like that, they could get hit.
Yeah, I agree. As soon as this becomes a significant thing.
The great thing about federations, though, is that you don't have to trust the people running the Federated Chamian Bank fully. Like, you just have to trust them that they won't conspire against you. And that, in my opinion, allows for pseudonymous federations. Like, just imagine we have a bunch of Twitternymous that have a reputation they care about, and they come together to form such a federation. And who should be prosecuted? Nobody knows who they are. Like, you can't prosecute a Twitternym. That's just not possible if they do their OPSEC correctly. So I think even if there was a crackdown, like, the federated part would make it still feasible to run such a federation. Especially since if you only take down one of the nodes, then the federation still runs. You did nothing.
Yeah,
they can just make it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as long as not a signing quorum of your federation all get pinched at the same time, like, the federation still operates. And if you start to lose trust in your federation, like maybe your federation people start tweeting crazy shitcoinery, then because this is all connected over the Lightning node, your exit cost is really low. Like that's one of the things that really jumped out to me about having these things be connected over Lightning, is that your switching cost is incredibly low. I think another interesting, like, stepping away from the resistance to nation state story for a minute, another thing that's just really interesting about this model, because it's just software that a couple people have to come together to run together, I think it opens up a lot of really interesting scenarios for community banking. That could be community banking at like a geographic level or within like your social group. So if we wanted to say on PlebNet, a bunch of plebs get together and run a federated Chaumian Mint, and people on PlebNet want to use it or not, like, that's great. I live in a town where I'm trying to get some of my local small businesses to take Lightning. We could definitely do a federated Chaumian Mint, like, for my town that plugs into the Lightning network, right? Like, you can have these things make sense at different levels of social organization, and you can choose the group of people, the group of custodians that make sense for you to trust, right? This is the Bitcoin beach model of, you have a community bank that you have a Lightning app that interacts with it on, but you don't have everybody responsible for opening up all their own channels. You can do that for like your community or a community of interest or an internet community, like whatever makes sense to you. You can really mix and match here. It's really interesting.
My fellow plebs, the Bitcoin conference is back. Bitcoin 2022, April 6th through the 9th, is the ultimate pilgrimage for the Bitcoin ecosystem. The Bitcoin conference is the biggest event in all of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. We're leveling up and making this bigger and better than ever. I'm talking straight to the moon with the 4-day-long festival in the heart of Miami at the Miami Beach Convention Center. This has something for everyone. Whether you're a high-powered Bitcoin entrepreneur, a core developer, or a Bitcoin newbie, Bitcoin 2022 is the ultimate place for you to be with your people and celebrate and learn about the Bitcoin culture. So make sure to go to b.tc/conference to lock in your official tickets and use promo code Satoshi for 10% off. You want more off? Pay in Bitcoin and you'll receive $100 off general admission and $1,000 off Whale Pass. Those are stackable. So go to b.tc/conference and attend the best conference in Bitcoin history. Yo, my fellow Bitcoin lovers, have I got something specifically curated for you? The Deep Dive is Bitcoin Magazine's premium markets intelligence newsletter. This isn't some paid group shilling buy and sell signals. No, this is a premium Bitcoin analysis led by Dylan LeClaire and his team of analysts. They break down in an easily digestible way what is happening on chain, in the derivatives markets, and in the greater macro backdrop context for Bitcoin. This newsletter turns volatility into a joke. So hit up members.bitcoin.magazine.com and use promo code podcast for 30% off the deep dive. That's members.bitcoinmagazine.com, promo code podcast for 30% off. Divorce your pay group and learn why Bitcoin is the strongest asset by Dylan and LeClaire and his team.
Maybe to elaborate
go ahead.
on the community banking for just a minute. Like Galloy is already doing this with Bitcoin Beach Wallet, but what they did is they went quickly to market, which is great because we needed it now. But what I'm trying to do with Minimint is improve privacy, because when you're doing like community banking, you don't want your neighbor to know how much you own. That's really bad. That it's probably even worse than Coinbase knowing how much you own, because such social structures, it's often preferable for your peers not to know how much you make or how much you own. And so in a community banking environment, privacy is even more important.
Yeah, I agree.
I had maybe a obscure technical question for Eric. Let's say that you had a federated Chamian Mint, and for some reason you didn't trust some of the participants or thought that there was a chance that it was going to fail. Do you think that it would be better to build into the protocol ways of, for example, ejecting members of the federation and voting in new ones? Or do you think people should just use the ease of exit and essentially just transfer all their funds to another federated Chaumian Mint that they trust more, maybe even with some of the old participants?
I think that's more or less an engineering trade-off. Like what you're describing is dynamic federations, and that took Blockstream quite a while to figure out for Liquid. And so I think initially I will launch without like this dynamic feature that you can just replace or switch in and out federation members. So that's just a lot of work. But ideally you would have this feature, because like the cost of switching isn't all that low actually. Like on an individual level, it might appear low, but like you still need to rebalance your channels. For if all your money flow is outgoing, then that's not optimal. Like ideally your federation has some balance of money flow. Otherwise, like in the current model, we have a Lightning Gateway, which is an independent actor of the federation. And the Lightning Gateway would have to repeat it, like actually withdraw Bitcoins from the federation to then rebalance their channels so they have outgoing capacity again. And I don't think it's optimal to like just migrate in that way. Like it would be a little bit better to be able to throw someone out of the federation if they're clearly compromised.
Interesting. Okay, so where do we go from here in this conversation? Are there specific other topics that we want to talk about? Matt, Vivek, Rindel, Eric, Casey, do we want to do like a round table? We can pull people up and get questions answered. What do y'all think?
Let's
do it.
I would love to hear Shinobi's opinion. Shinobi just came up here.
Give us your thoughts, Shinobi.
This is epic, and I'd like to know if anybody has talked at all about using the federated mints to enforce more complicated smart contracts.
Dude, that's literally the fucking hand grenade that I was about to lob into this conversation.
Let's fucking go.
Dude, okay, yeah. So this is like my soapbox. In my mind, the final form for federated Chamian Mints on Lightning Network is that you have them process more interesting smart contract semantics. So imagine I go and set up a Chaumian Mint where you can upload, I'm just going to say it, like an EVM compatible smart contract. I don't need to make a shitcoin.
Sacrilege.
You know what I can do? No, you know what I can do? I can charge you to execute the contract. It's called, I don't know, like pay for execution SaaS, right? Like we've been doing it for years. But if you want to do EVM smart contract shit, you lightning over some sats to my Chaumian Mint, I will execute EVM smart contracts and publish a snark or some other zero knowledge proof in a publicly viewable place that it executed properly. You can do crazy speculative smart contracts with Eric inside of my mint. And then when you decide that you want to do like crazy other smart contracts that only Shinobi's mint supports, you lightning over there and you do it. So we can have this network of these little islands that have different smart contract semantics that have different trade-offs or different guarantees or different semantics. And you can just choose which casino or which computer you want to play in, zip yourself over there, do it, and then leave when you're done. And we don't have to push new bullshit into the base layer. We don't have to create new tokens. It's just go wherever has the compute capabilities that you care about.
Mind blown.
I love the idea of it's like when you go into like PvP arena, like in whatever your favorite MMORPG is. It's like you go in and it's like these smart contracts will eat your face off. Get ready.
Think about it. And there's no like restriction that would prevent a mint from issuing tokens representing things other than Bitcoin too. So you can get the entire like ERC20 type dynamic and interaction with those types of contracting platforms directly in the mint.
So how is that?
If you're OpenSea and you want to do an OpenSea Chaumian mint, people can go there and do, and then you can leave when you're done.
And OpenSea has no control.
And you can use single-use seals, Rindell, for something representing an NFT instead of just a Chaumian token. So that single-use seal is actually universally portable to all the different mints out there. It's not just a token issued solely by that mint's authority.
Wait, but I understand the premise, but how would that be? I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around why that would be better than, like, they could still totally screw everybody out of their shit.
Not with that. Like a single-use seal would be like, imagine I just make a key that represents something, and then I timestamp it with open timestamps. And if I want to give it to you, I sign like a transfer to your public key and timestamp it with open timestamps. And then you keep all of that data, like my original key, the timestamp data, my signature. And let's say you want to go past that to Rindell. You do the same thing. You extend it again and sign his key and timestamp it, and he keeps all the data. And so it's like a little growing mini blockchain that is just the representation of this single asset and its ownership chain.
Yeah,
so that could interact with things like a Chaumian mint. That could be an atomic part of a smart contract that the mint is enforcing, interacting with like their native Bitcoin token.
Yeah, the thing that you need for a single-use seal is... Go ahead, Eric.
Possibility of these, let's call it NFTs for the sake of it, is interesting. Not because some wacko artists to publish some apes, but like the one big problem we still face is domain names. And we still need a decentralized, like a really decentralized naming system. And ideally, this would be built on Bitcoin. So single-use seals, I think that's the main application for it. Like,
that's
it's
so
not
interesting.
Some weird stuff that people are doing on Ethereum.
Whoa.
Yeah, because the thing that you need to make...
Oh my gosh, and it was not controlled by some centralized bullshit. And
Yeah, the thing that you need for single-use seals is you need like a proof of publication mechanism, and it turns out we have a really good distributed ledger like underneath all these Chaumian mints.
What are you talking about? Which ledger could you possibly be referring to? The answer is always Bitcoin.
I was gonna say something about BSV, but I can't do it.
Well, you threw up a little bit in your mouth just even thinking about it.
I just asphyxiated on my own vomit thinking about it. But yeah, think about it this way, right? Like you have a world where people can choose the semantics and the trust and the different trade-offs that make sense for them, for their use case, their risk tolerance, their application. Those things are interoperable over the Lightning Network. If you decide that you just want to nope out of the whole thing, you can resolve anything down to layer 1 Bitcoin. And it's all like more private and more scalable than any other cryptocurrency out there. That's the final form of this shit.
This is Bitcoin if we don't get channel factories. And it's not as cool as channel factories, but it's good enough.
Wait, hold on. Back the truck up. What do you mean by this is Bitcoin if we don't get channel factories? How does channel factories address all the stuff we've been talking about?
Scalability and the ability to partition things. But my point is, like, if we stop getting more native second layers to Bitcoin, Lightning, the base layer, and Chaumian mints are enough to scale everything a private way for everything.
Got it.
Yeah, because I think channel factories are super interesting. But coming back to WeMark earlier, like they lack UX, and I think that's what will force them to be something that only power users.
You're cutting in and out. This is the most excruciating thing. Eric, my man.
I think what he was saying, though, is that the user experience for channel factories is just real garbage, and it's a lot more complicated than Lightning. So that's a tough thing to get past power users, I think, is what he was saying.
Like the cool part of this proposal to me, we've been talking about in Bitcoin land, we've been talking about all this time, have privacy that is cheaper than non-private transactions and have privacy that's easier than non-private transactions. And this trade-off balance makes it so that you can just have a mobile wallet where you just load it up with $50 worth of sats and you'll be paying lower fees than anyone who's not using Lightning. You're able to interact with the whole Lightning network and you have great privacy guarantees at a mitigated custodial risk. Like that trade-off balance just seems absolutely fantastic to me.
Yeah, it's kind of if I have Strike on my phone and I pay another Strike user, I don't know for sure, but I really doubt they're actually doing a Lightning transaction. Like I assume that they're just bumping balances because it would be insane to do anything else. And then if I want to pay somebody else that's out on the Lightning network, then it does an honest to goodness Lightning transaction. Imagine that, but without the single custodial risk and with much better privacy from the custodian. And that's where you land. And I think that that's amazing. And then on top of it, something that we haven't really talked about, but I just wanted to touch on is I think another scaling pressure that Lightning is going to face is the size of the channel graph and being able to like efficiently compute routes over it, especially on like memory constrained devices, right? If everybody in the world has Lightning channels and everybody else in the world, you're not going to be finding efficient routes on your phone. Like it's just not going to happen. And there's different mechanisms that people have been throwing around about the way that we solve this problem on the internet is with route aggregation and with having a bunch of smaller networks all aggregated and then routing between larger networks. Like that's how internet routing happens. And different people are talking about different mechanisms to do something similar on the Lightning Network. And this very much accomplishes a similar thing, right? If you say a lot of like mobile users are going to be using their choice of Chaumian Mint, and then Lightning routing needs to happen between these mints, that's a much smaller problem because you've aggregated all of these mobile users down to a single endpoint on the Lightning Network. And that's a great way of handling the scaling pressure.
What else? What else we got?
I'm assuming that Eric already discussed the potential for doing like atomic interactions between the Mint and Lightning, so that either finishes.
He's a genius. He figured out someone to sell some reg test Bitcoin to atomically and buy a coffee.
We're not even joking, Shinobi.
Yeah, I convinced myself to do this, so I don't know.
Strictly speaking, it was a true statement. That's
Still had to pay. Yes. Yeah, one thing I was quite sad about is seeing darknet markets like switching to other platforms. And I think we really, as a Bitcoin community, need to figure out how to make Bitcoin good enough for them. Because once I hear from one of my friends that they bought drugs on a darknet market with Minimint, then that's when I know I've won. That's what we want to achieve. Make it good enough and easy enough to achieve good privacy for people to use it for whatever they want. No questions asked.
I could not, but Shinobi does
I
not
think
agree.
that honestly, no, I don't disagree. That would be awesome. I just think that a lot of that whole dynamic really just comes down to that a lot of darknet market operators are frankly morons. A bunch of those marketplaces are just like copy paste PHP scripts that get passed around. There's not a lot of actual sound original engineering. And you just have a bunch of people, from my perspective, who are clownishly just like, we keep getting busted because we use Bitcoin like morons, instead of looking at things like the Lightning Network. So like that, in my mind, that comes down to people doing things like that are frankly idiots. And they need to be better educated on different ways that they can use Bitcoin more privately.
I think, though, that I totally agree with you. I think most of the people that are in those situations are not availing themselves of the available information. But I think that we succeed when this is undeniable, right? When the technology just is self-evident and doesn't require someone to, like, someone has to be willfully ignoring the reality in order for them to not use these things. I don't think it's as simple as just it has to be possible.
We have quite some latency here. I think especially when we're talking about users of darknet markets, we can't expect them to know how to use Bitcoin privately. And nowadays, like with Lightning, it's really complicated. Setting up a Lightning node and taking care that your UTXOs that you use for that tumbled or like CoinJoins, it's just really complicated. And I think someone who is stoned half of the day can't really do it. And I really hope that Minimint will be able to support such users and not make them fuck up. That's how we actually get people to use privacy, and not by making it complicated. It has to be super simple and stupid, so that even someone on his third joint can just use it. Otherwise, it won't work.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but in the context of darknet market, I don't think the purchaser really needs to be crazy secure and private. Like, you got a decent light wallet that's not like Phoenix and doing like trampoline routing. Like, it's the merchants and the people receiving payments and selling things that really need to know how to handle their privacy, because they're the ones that law enforcement is going after. The cops don't care that you bought a bag of weed on that.
Yeah, it's kind of, there was that ad campaign where it's like Geico, so easy a caveman can do it. I think what Eric is saying is we need to have privacy preserving Bitcoin so easy that a dumbass who's cargo culting PHP code off of Stack Overflow can do it. Like, Lightning isn't there. For better or worse, like, that is not running a Lightning node.
That's fair enough.
I have a couple of questions for Eric, if you guys don't mind. Obviously, I've been very interested in the concept of federations for quite a bit. I was wondering, well, first off, maybe you can answer that very quickly. Is there a concept of fees, like coordinator fee, the system is currently designed?
There definitely will have to be some fee, because it takes some money to just keep the on-chain wallet operational. So every time you do a withdraw or deposit, you would probably pay a fee. And ideally, such a federation would also be self-sustainable. So you would probably charge some sort of fee.
Yeah, I agree. Good answer. I guess one of my concern is we're not exactly reinventing the wheel. Obviously, the Chaumian component is extremely interesting, but this is essentially just another federation, not unlike obviously what Blockstream and Liquid has. And one of the downside, or actually one of the issue with that, is that we've seen zero uptake in terms of, we haven't seen other wallets integrate Liquid, and it feels to me like there's an incentive problem. So hopefully some kind of fee sharing or fee revenue can address that to a certain extent. My other question is in terms of obviously incentivizing the members of the federation. Was there any thought given ever to maybe requiring time-locked fidelity bonds for those members?
To the first question, I think the big difference between Liquid and Federated Chamian Mint is that the Federated Chamian Mint can use Lightning, and everywhere where Lightning is accepted, then you can use your Mint token. But with Liquid, it's actually something quite different. There isn't the infrastructure to seamlessly use it with, for example, Lightning. So that's a big difference.
So sorry, let me just jump on that real quick. So what you're saying is that basically by the Chaumian Mint being integrated with Lightning, any Lightning wallet is automatically interoperable with the Chaumian Mint.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes a choice of the user. Because with Liquid, it's actually a choice of the user and the merchant together. Because without the merchant choosing to use Liquid, the user can't do it. And federated mints, then it's just the user's choice. And if we build a good enough product, they will come. It's just another Lightning wallet.
But then the wallet would the wallet need to know that this Bitcoin, the UX would have to account that the Bitcoin is from the Chaumian Mint or not?
Yeah, you'd have specialized federated mint wallets. Ideally, we could have a standard that every mint speaks the same protocol essentially, and then you have some wallet that supports all the federated Chaumian mints out there. But your recipient doesn't need to know about that you're using a federated Chaumian Mint wallet. They don't care. They just give you a Lightning invoice, and you give that to your mint. And then your Mint wallet instructs your local federation to pay the Lightning invoice. That's how it should work.
Okay, but then the sender does need to use a Mint-specific wallet.
Certainly, yeah, but not specific to a specific federation, but just to the Mint protocol.
Okay, cool.
Made me think of something, Alex, if you don't mind me cutting in real quick. Have you considered at all, Eric, support for pseudonymous accounts? just so that you have a kind of safer way for users to hold long-term balances in the event of a key rotation, so that the mint spend table doesn't just keep growing to infinity?
Yeah, definitely. Like the accounts thing is a natural addition, because I'm already using smart contractable accounts, like what you were discussing. I already need smart contracts in the Federation to integrate Lightning. So it's just a natural next step to enable users to have accounts with arbitrary smart contract capability, like not just some Lightning integration special smart contract. And that would allow certain interesting things, like you could think about the Chaumian eCash as your spending account, your checking account, and the pseudonymous account inside the Federation, which might be locked by 2 of 3 multisig or just some conventional key script. That's your saving account. And because with the Chaumian eCash, you have the problem, you can't really back it up, because with every spend, your set of coins you own changes, and it would be really cumbersome to always back them up. So currently, I'm thinking that if you lose your wallet or if you lose your phone, you lose the eCash inside it. But if you have this checking account, which is just like a pseudonymous account locked by some sort of script, that you can keep. That's easy to back up. You just need to back up a private key, which we all know how to do by now. So that's definitely planned. And a second interesting thought I got from discussing this with Obi, that the Federation, in the federated trust model, you can easily have oracles, because like the Federation members, you trust them anyway. So why not let them act as oracles? And that would allow you to build a smart contract for these accounts that says if someone convinces enough Federation members that, for example, you died, then your legal hire can get access to these funds. Like he was thinking about like non-technical communities that don't really know how to do inheritance on Bitcoin or stuff like that. And yeah, this might actually be a good way to implement it. Just if you have community banking, why not use your like social structure of your community to also ensure that like you can inherit properly without needing a lot of technical knowledge about it.
I'm going to wind us down. We're currently over time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Is there anything that we want to close out on or touch on before we wind down and go around and give a...
Eric, did you tell us when we should expect a mobile wallet on available for Android at least?
No, not really, because I can't really give anything, but
like
my dream
2 weeks?
is to have it ready for next HCP.
You told me 72
next October.
You told me 72 hours before the call.
Time is of the essence,
Yeah,
Eric.
right.
Let's get to it.
Yeah, like currently there's still a lot of work to be done on the back end, so the front end has been quite neglected. But if we get people that are interested in front end stuff, go ahead and please.
So the correct response to that question is patches welcome.
Yeah, so everyone in the audience,
Right, exactly.
This is an incredibly important and interesting technology that we're talking about here. There is, and people are always like, oh man, I don't know how to get involved in Bitcoin as a software engineer or as a human. This is a call to action. Reach out to Eric. If you're a software engineer and you want to get involved with sound money and the technology that's going to drive the future, this is your chance. Hit up Eric.
If you have time for a really quick question.
Go for it, Neski.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Congrats on Taproot. So question is that, is there such a thing as a typical lifetime of a Chaumian Mint token, or is it really depends on the...
That would be defined by the Federation, because I think someone, I don't remember who was it, maybe Shinobi, mentioned that like you have this list of spent tokens and that just keeps growing. So in most implementations, you say after some time, you invalidate old tokens that are signed with old keys and you force people to roll over their funds into a new key set, just get them reissued with new keys. And that's how you keep the list of spent coins from growing indefinitely. But yeah, that's up to debate with the Federation. Make it a year, make it 2 years, I don't know. There's no real right answer for that. But there might be some lifetime to these tokens.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Real quick, fidelity bonds.
I don't know if it makes sense because to actually incentivize good behavior, they need to be quite big. That would make such a federation less capital efficient. Like your cost of capital would go way up. And like maybe one thing they would be good for is to incentivize people to actually stay online. And if they go offline, then you could have a penalty. Like that wouldn't be a fidelity bond, but you could have some amount that they need to deposit, and in case they're offline, then that goes to a common fund and gets redistributed. So they actually have incentive to stay online, because that might be a problem if people don't make enough money from it. They might neglect node maintenance. So yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. It looks like we lost. Oh no, Casey, you're still there.
Okay, it's not happening. We're not letting you end it.
No, look, we're winding down. This is the go gently into that good night. Casey,
This is the last.
the last two, please. No, Casey, is there anything that you want to speak to, shill, jump in here about anything we've been talking about so far, or anything else that you're working on?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll just shill the project I'm working on. It's called Agora. It lets you sell shit online for Lightning Network.
Yes.
You just put your data on a server, and then you can sell it. It's like really simple. Like you just be like, hey, you want to buy this PDF? It'll be like 1,000 sats. And then people pay you 1,000 sats, and then you download the PDF. I'm thinking about starting a meme. This is like the real Bitcoin NFT, but I think it's maybe just too dumb of a meme. But so, yeah, I guess maybe the non-shilly thing that I'll say is that...
That's agora.download.
That's right.
That is correctly.
It is agora.download, and it is also github.com/agora-org/agora. Yeah. Thanks for the shilling tips, bro.
Yeah.
But yeah. Federation soon. 2 weeks, 72 hours, definitely. But I guess like I thought, which is that I think we should be watching Lightning Network usability and doing all we can to both make it more usable and to get users onto less centralized services. And I think maybe a little bit of pessimism is good in the sense of not just assuming every problem with Lightning Network usability will just be solved and fall into place. I think there's a lot of tricky stuff there, and we should be keeping an eye on it. That's what I'll leave everybody with.
I love it. Matt, is there anything you want to shill, speak to, mention?
I just wanted to thank Eric. I'm super excited about your project, and I was just fucking around with the timeline. I'm willing to wait, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. This has been an amazing conversation, Eric. Also, thank you so much for joining. Casey, thank you so much for joining. I posted Casey's blog post at the top in the nest, which you should all check out. It's a really good, like very high level overview of some of the stuff we've been talking about and what Federated Chamian Mints are and why they're awesome. Follow both of them. This is definitely one of the more exciting things that is happening in Bitcoin, in my opinion, at the moment. I think there's everybody's excited about Taproot, which is fucking awesome and really exciting. But there's also these sort of like unsung heroes that are also working on this stuff and writing about it, and it's part of the future. I also am, of course, going to shill the conference. If you do not already have a ticket for Bitcoin 2022, it is going to be absolutely incredible. Matt and I are working very closely on the open source stage. There's going to be discussions like this one, other topics, more that you should definitely partake in. It's also going to be
Me and P have only disagreed on one thing so far.
That's true. And I will die on that hill, which is I argue that Cold Card is the thing that is the coolest part of the CoinKite lineup, and Matt Odell argues that it is OpenDime, and we have come to blows on it several times.
Hey, so P, you skipped me when it came to shilling things.
I just assumed that since your face changes every other day and your name is Rindal, that you would not want to shill something, but I apologize profoundly and profusely. Give us your shill.
So here's a shill. Everybody, if you are excited about things happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem, or if you're not excited about things happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem, you can contribute. There's lots of awesome open source projects like Minimint or Bitcoin Core or your favorite wallet software. And all of them are looking for more contributions. They're all looking for people to test things, work on documentation, submit patches. So you can go and get involved. Every open source project that's out, many open source projects that are out there are very excited to have new people come and help. You can go and ask, what's a good bug for me to work on? And people will not only give you a good bug that's like easy and straightforward to figure out, but they'll work with you on how to fix it and learn the code base. Or if you want to write better documentation, they'll help you get a test environment set up. Like having maintained open source projects before, if somebody shows up and wants to help, a lot of open source maintainers will bend over backwards to make sure that you have a good kind of onboarding experience, because contributions are what make the world go round. If you want to learn Rust to work on Minimint or Sapio or LDK or any of these other projects, just Google the Rust book. It's really high quality, easy to read. Highly recommend it. It doesn't really matter what your level of experience is. There's some way that you can contribute to open source.
Absolutely. And I'll go even further, which is you do not actually have to be a software engineer in order to contribute massively to open source projects. The thing that is in the most finite supply is people who are interested and willing to write documentation or to proofread documentation. So if you want to get deeply involved and be someone who, is a force multiplier, and you are willing to figure out how these projects work or how to run your own mini mint or any of the other projects that you might be involved in, go, and if you don't have to be a software engineer, go read through the documentation, go take a tutorial on how to submit a GitHub pull request, and you can absolutely be a contributor to even Bitcoin Core and all these other projects, and your contributions will be worshipped and appreciated forever, because documentation is the last thing that most software engineers write, and many projects today have no documentation or broken documentation because there's just not enough time. On that note, one other thing I forgot to say, if you don't have a ticket and you want to buy one for Bitcoin 2022, code Have Fun Staying Poor, that is, the actual promo code is HFSP, will save you 10% on your ticket. Go forth. Adios.
Thanks a lot for having me. And if anyone wants to meet me, I'm at Adopting Bitcoin currently, so just come by and say hi. So,
cheers.
All right. Thanks again, guys.